A stage driver waited at the relay station. The bride who came was deaf and mute. The horses told me first. I'd been running the Calient relay for 11 years by then, and the horses always knew before I did when something was off. That afternoon, the lead pair came in lathered wrong, not the kind of lather you get from hard road, loose and foamy around the harness, but the tight, skin-close sweat that means a driver held them too hard for too long. I had the wheel chocked down before Earl Stinson even pulled the brake. He jumped off the box like a man wanting distance between himself and whatever was behind him, and he wouldn't look at me straight. "Rough pull," I said. He said rough enough and walked to the trough. I unhitched the lead pair myself. That was when I heard her. Not a sound exactly, more the absence of one. The stage door swung open and she stepped down, no help, no hand offered, which most women want on that last big step, and she stood in the yard with a worn canvas bag at her feet and looked around at the relay station, the corral, the dry hills going orange in the late sun, and she didn't say a word. Not to me, not to the dust, not to anything. She was maybe 30, dark hair pinned up but coming loose on one side, a wool traveling dress the color of old iron, worn at both elbows. She had a way of looking at a thing full on, like she was measuring it, that most people reserve for things that could hurt them. She looked at me that way. Then she looked at the station house. I walked over. I said, "You'll be Miss Clara Voss." She looked at my mouth when I spoke. Then she reached into the front pocket of the bag and handed me a folded letter, not timid about it, direct, the way you hand someone a tool. I opened it. It was from a land broker in Tucson named Aldous Fry, and it was addressed to me, to Mr. Elias Cade, Relay Station 7, Calient Road, and it said that the arrangement I'd entered into by post had been completed, that Miss Voss had boarded the Tucson stage 3 days prior, and that I should be advised, per the terms Miss Voss had authorized him to disclose, that she had been deaf from birth and did not speak. I read it twice. I folded it back up and put it in my shirt pocket. I looked at her. She was still watching my face, not afraid, not sorry, not asking me for anything, just watching, steady as a fence post in hard ground, to see what I would do. I picked up her bag. She followed me inside. I want to be clear about something, because a man telling this story could go one of two directions, and I'm only interested in one of them. I could tell you I was a saint about it. I wasn't. I stood at the stove that first night and cooked beans I didn't taste and thought about the letter from Fry and felt something that I won't call fury exactly, but was close enough to it that my jaw hurt. I had written to that broker in January, after 3 years of eating alone and sleeping under a roof that leaked in 2 places and watching the stage pull away every morning with its noise and its people and its sense of somewhere else to be. I had written a careful letter. I had said I was a relay driver, that I owned the station house and the corrals and 12 acres of pasture ground, that I was 44 years old and healthy, that I wanted a woman who was willing to work and willing to stay, and that I would be a fair man and a steady one. I had not received a letter back from Miss Voss herself. The broker had handled it all. I didn't think to ask why. So I stood there and was angry, quietly, the way I did most things. And then I turned around. She had found the broom. She was sweeping the far corner of the main room, the corner I'd given up on sometime around December, and she was doing it the right way, short strokes, working the dirt toward the door, not raising a cloud. She hadn't asked where the broom was. She'd found it. She was wearing an apron she must have gotten from her bag because I didn't own one. I watched her sweep for a while. I set 2 bowls on the table. She sat down and we ate. She ate everything in the bowl and didn't make a show of it. When she was done, she looked at the pot on the stove and looked at me, and I nodded, and she got up and served herself more. Something about that, the directness of it, no performance of politeness, no waiting to be offered, settled something in me I didn't know had been wound up. After supper, she took a small notebook from her bag and wrote in it, and turned it to face me across the table. The handwriting was clean and even. It said, "I know this is not what you expected. I will work hard and I will not be a burden. If you decide in the morning that I should go back, I will go. I only ask that you decide tonight so I can sleep knowing." I sat with that a minute. I wrote back. She pushed the pencil toward me before I even reached for it. I wrote, "Nobody's going back anywhere. Get some sleep." She read it. Something shifted in her face, small but real, like a door that had been braced against wind finally settling on its hinges. She put the notebook back in her bag, took the lamp I pointed her toward, and went to the room I'd made up for her. I sat at the table for a long time after. The first 2 weeks I want to tell straight because they were not easy, and I think a man who tells only the good parts is a man who wants to be seen as better than he was. Communication was the thing. Not the fact of it being hard. I'd expected hard. What I hadn't expected was how much I talked without meaning to, the offhand things, the passing remarks that aren't really about anything except filling silence. I'd lived alone long enough that I'd mostly stopped, but having someone there started it back up, and half the time I'd say something and then catch myself and feel like an idiot. Not because she'd be offended. She wasn't the offending type. But because I hadn't thought to face her, or the light was wrong and she'd missed it, and whatever small, ordinary thing I'd said was just gone. She was patient about it in the way patient people are patient, without making you feel the patience. If she didn't catch something, she'd tap twice on whatever surface was near, which was her signal for "say that again," and I'd say it again facing her, slower. She was a fair lip reader for English. She was better for Spanish, which surprised me, and she explained by writing that she'd grown up in a town along the Santa Cruz with a lot of Mexican families, and had learned to read Spanish lips as a girl because the nuns at her school were Mexican and Cowboy. That made me laugh. The first time I'd laughed at something in that station house that didn't involve a horse doing something stupid. She taught me the alphabet and hand signs inside of a week. Finger spelling, she called it. I was slow at it and clumsy. Hands that have pulled harness straps and spliced lead rope for 20 years don't move the way she needed them to, fine and precise. But she was not a woman who quit on a thing before it was ready, and she drilled me at the supper table every evening with a patience that would have made a schoolteacher jealous. By the end of the second week, I could spell out short words. By the end of the month, I could hold a simple conversation without the notebook, which she seemed to appreciate more than she showed. What she showed was this. One morning I spelled out something wrong. I was trying to say the east pasture gate latch was broken, and she watched my hands and then made a face, just slightly, a contained version of the face a person makes when they step in something, and then she took my hands and moved 2 of my fingers into the right position, firm, not rough, the way you correct a child's grip on a tool. And then she let go and waited for me to try again. I thought about that for a long time, her hands on my hands for those 2 seconds. I thought about it more than was useful. The stage came through Tuesdays and Fridays. I ran the relay on those days, fresh horses out, spent horses in, checked the harness, logged the time, water the driver, move the mail bags if there were any. Clara learned the Tuesday-Friday rhythm in the first week and was already heating water for the driver's cup before the coach was through the gate. Earl Stinson, who'd been awkward about her since that first day, wouldn't look at her, started warming up by the 3rd week, and by the 2nd month he was taking off his hat when he came into the yard, which he'd never done for me. She had that effect on people, not because she performed anything. She didn't flutter or fuss or make people feel special in the way that's really about making the fusser feel good. She just did the necessary thing well and without complaint, and people felt the difference between that and all the other ways a thing can be done. She planted a kitchen garden on the south side of the station house in March. I hadn't planted anything there because the ground was hard caliche, and I'd figured it for not worth the trouble. She broke it up with the mattock over 3 days, working in the mornings before the heat, and she got it to a depth she was happy with and seeded it with packets she'd carried in her bag from Tucson. Squash, peppers, a dry climate tomato I'd never seen. When the first shoots came up, she came and found me at the corral and pulled my sleeve and pointed, and the look on her face was, I don't have a word. Like she'd been waiting a long time to show somebody something and had begun to wonder if she ever would. I told her she'd done good work, spelled it out with my hands. She smiled. Not a big smile, not a performance, just the real kind. I went back to the corral and felt the weight of 11 years of not quite right lift off me like water off oilskin. There were 2 incidents that year that I have to say plainly because they're part of it. The first was in April. A man named Hector Deeks, he ran cattle on lease land north of the road, had been giving me trouble about the East Pasture water rights for 2 years. It was a small dispute but a mean one, the kind where the issue isn't really the water but the fact that one man decided early on he was bigger than another man and can't let it go without losing face. Deeks had 3 hands and I had none, and he knew it. He came to the station on a Thursday when I'd been in the back corral, working a pulled shoe on one of the relay horses. Clara was in the yard. He rode in with 2 of his men and said something to her. I found out what later, and when I came around the corner of the station house, I saw her standing between the well and the gate with her arms at her sides and her chin up, not backing up, not afraid, just waiting to see what he'd do. I came around the corner with the rasp still in my hand. Deeks looked at me and said, You got a woman who won't answer a direct question, Cade. That's rude. I said, She can't hear you. He thought I was making a joke. I wasn't. I said it again. He looked at her the way men like him look at anything they didn't expect, and something crawled across his face that I didn't like. He said something I won't repeat. I said, You're going to turn those horses around now. He said he wasn't and started talking about the water rights, and I walked up and stood close enough that he could smell 11 years of horses and hard work on me, and I said low, not loud, I'm going to say this once. You come back here and talk to my wife that way again and whatever happens after is on you. I've got nothing left to lose and you've got 3 men who don't die for your wages. Think on that. He thought on it. He turned his horses around. I stood in the yard and listened to them leave and then turned to Clara. She had seen most of it. She could read from a distance when she knew the shape of what was being said. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she wrote in the notebook, You called me your wife. I had. It had come out without planning. We'd been married at the Calient courthouse in February, a civil ceremony with 2 clerks as witnesses, everything legal. But I hadn't said the word out loud since then, not that I could remember. I said, That's what you are. She wrote, Yes. That was all she wrote, but she kept the notebook closed for the rest of the day, which was her way of not needing to say anything more. The second thing was worse, and I don't want to hurry past it. In June, a dry June, hotter than any I could remember, there was a fever moving through the valley. It hit the Ray's family at the South Fork first, 3 children. The youngest didn't make it, and then it came up the road and it came into my station house. Clara went down on a Thursday morning. I knew by the way she moved, she was never slow, and she was slow, and I put my hand to her forehead and it was like touching a stove lid. I will not describe the week that followed in more detail than this. I did not leave the station house except to water the horses. I sent a note with Stinson to the doctor in Calient, and the doctor came the following morning and said what it was and what to do, and I did it. Cold water, broth when she could take it, keep the fever from going too high. She was not a good patient. I don't say that harshly, it's just the truth. A woman that's self-sufficient does not know how to be still and be helped, and she fought me on it. Tried to get up twice on the second day when the fever was at its worst, and I had to be firm. I sat in the chair by her bed for most of 4 days. I learned to sleep sitting up, which I already knew how to do from years of night drives, but not for 4 days running. On the 5th morning the fever broke. I was asleep in the chair. I woke up and she was looking at me. The color was different in her face, the hot red gone, just the ordinary worn-out pale of someone coming back from somewhere bad. She reached out and put her hand on my forearm. I was still half asleep. Her hand was cooler than it had been. I said, "There you are." She couldn't hear me, but she kept her hand on my arm. I put my hand over hers. I sat like that for a while, just sitting, her hand under mine, the morning light coming in through the one small window on the east wall. After a time, I got up and made broth. I brought it back and sat by her while she drank it. She was too weak for the notebook. She just drank it and watched me, and I watched back. And whatever passed between us in that room in that light, I don't have words for it. I only know that when she was fully recovered, 2 weeks later, and back in the garden and back at the table and back at every ordinary thing that made up our life there, nothing felt ordinary anymore. It felt earned. She and I developed a private language that year. Not formal, nothing I could teach anybody. Just the things that accumulate between people who have to work at being understood. A certain way she'd tilt her head that meant she thought I was being stubborn. The two-tap signal on any surface. A look she had, just slightly widened eyes, that meant something had surprised her and she was deciding how she felt about it. I had a habit she picked up on. I rubbed the back of my neck when I was thinking something I didn't want to say out loud, and after a while when I'd do it, she'd reach across and pull my hand down from my neck and look at me, patient, waiting. I'd usually say it then. She was the only person I'd ever known who made me want to say the things I'd decided not to say. Deeks sent a man to talk to me about the water rights in July. Just a man, riding alone, no trouble in him. We settled it in 20 minutes. I don't know what changed on his end. Maybe he heard about the fever and about me not leaving the station. Maybe men like Deeks have a line they don't cross and I'd found it by standing on it. I don't know. What I know is that I told Clara over supper that night, and she looked at me across the table with a look I am going to try to describe and probably can't. It wasn't admiration. It was something more settled than that. It was the look of a woman who had been watching someone carefully for a long time and had made up her mind about what she saw and was at peace with it. The way you look at something that's proved itself solid. I'd been looked at with tolerance most of my life, with indifference, with the mild regard people have for someone who does a useful job and stays out of the way. I was not a man people looked at with much more than that. She looked at me like I was something worth looking at. I picked up the notebook and spelled something out with my hands, clumsy still, always clumsy, but she never seemed to mind the clumsiness as long as I was trying. I said, "I'm glad you stayed." She said, signed, the signs she'd been teaching me, her hands moving in the lamplight, easy and quick, the way she did everything when she was comfortable. I was never going to go. Then she picked up her bowl and went back to eating, and the lamp made a small sound when the wick needed trimming, and somewhere out in the corral a horse shifted its weight. And that was it, that was the whole of it. I got up and trimmed the wick. I am going to tell you how that year ended, which was not with anything big. The first hard frost came in October. I had a relay horse that was going lame in the left foreleg, an old injury, calcium buildup, the kind you manage and eventually lose, and I'd been working him in the small corral through September, light work, keeping the leg loose, checking him daily. Clara had taken an interest. She wasn't a horsewoman when she came, but she learned things the way she learned everything, by watching long and moving only when she was sure. The morning of the first frost, I found her in the corral with the bay. She was standing at his shoulder, not doing anything dramatic, just standing with her hand flat on his neck, and he had his head down and was breathing slow, that particular heavy ease horses fall into when something they trust is nearby. She heard me know that's not right. She felt me. She always felt when I came into a space she was in. She turned and pointed at the horse, then pointed at me, then made the sign we'd worked out for something like, "This is yours." Meaning he trusts you, This is because of you." I came and stood beside her. The horse didn't move. The frost was still white on the corral fence rails, and the sun was coming up low and red out of the east, and the air had the sharp, clean smell of the cold. She put her hand through my arm. I stood there with the frost and the red light and the old horse breathing and her arm through mine, and the 11 years of alone behind me, and I thought, this is the relay station. This is where you wait until the next thing comes through. And the next thing had come through. And I was going to be good to it. The horse lasted another 2 winters before we let him go. The garden did well that first year, better the second. Earl Stinson retired and a younger driver took the route, a Tejano kid named Fuentes who Clara liked immediately. She could read his Spanish lips without effort, and they talked more than she talked to most people. I fixed the 2 leaks in the roof in November. I built a better room, bigger, properly chinked, the winter of the second year. I am 61 years old as I sit here and tell this. I have told it out of order, which is how things actually sit in a man's memory, not in a line but in clusters, the things that mattered nearest to the front, the ordinary days blurred together behind. She is outside right now. I can see her through the window, same window that let in the morning light when she was sick and I sat beside her all those hours. She's in the garden. It's late in the season and there's not much left, but she's out there anyway, checking something, the way she always does, not because there's work to do, but because it's hers, and checking on what's yours is its own kind of pleasure. In a few minutes I'll go out there. I won't say anything. I'll just stand next to her and look at whatever she's looking at, and she'll feel me there the way she always does, and she'll put her hand through my arm. The frost will come tonight. We'll be ready for it.